part of it, but I want to respect people's time, and we've got a lot to cover today. So, and I'm not going to do this as the full like projected PowerPoint just because it makes it hard for me to see everybody on the screen. So just really quick, we'll start out, Kevin will give an update on the Recce Award itself. The bulk of the meeting, we're actually going to focus on the project management plan, which is the more detailed planning work that the technical team's been doing. Take a little time to for the jurisdictions to hear from the technical team, get to know the great folks that are doing a lot of this work on our behalf. And then we'll dive a little bit more into what, at least in DOE language, is budget period 1, i.e. think of it as phase 1 of the project. It's the first 18 months. And in particular, we've got a couple of very near-term deliverables we need to focus on. One of those is the survey work. And so I will hand it over to Anne, who's going to talk a little bit about what she needs from the group with respect to the surveys. And then wrap up, we've got a few reminders / requests for you all, and then upcoming meetings and next steps. So, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so we are still awaiting finalization for the award through DOE, and it's in the pipeline. There's a check-in, the quarterly check-in happened with the DOE team, and nothing significant to report. So working on contracts between NBI and subrecipients, and those should be out shortly with, yeah, there'll be a few modifications that will have to change once the final contract from DOE comes in, as I've said. So that's all from me, if there are no questions.
All right. And just for like the benefit of the jurisdictions, because you haven't been involved in some of these kind of background conversations, and also a shout out to our technical team. Without the final award from DOE, NBI has not been able to go into contract with the subrecipients, and we've needed to move forward. We've tried to be respectful, but our technical folks have been willing to put some time in to get us to this point without contracts in place, which is greatly appreciated, and we certainly don't want to abuse that. So Kevin's working on getting some interim contracts in place. We'll have to go back and modify those, but at least we can provide that kind of assurance and you know, framework for the technical team members who've been so kind in what they're doing. All right, so project management plan. And since we've got new folks in the group, and just to kind of, you know, go back to the basics here, I wanted to remind everyone real quickly of the project objectives. So as I was putting this together, more and more, I'm kind of thinking in like the tangible things we're doing, and then some of the more intangible aspects of what we want to have happen as part of this. And so that's how I kind of broke it out here. So in terms of the tangibles, I think everyone's aware, you know, we're aiming to create this regional resilience code to be published by ICC. There will be some supporting programs around that. We've talked about emphasis on extreme heat and retrofitting existing buildings, and then building off of that, a net zero roadmap that's more of a high-level policy and perhaps to some extent code document to kind of say, you know, from the resilience code, then where do you go to really give us all as jurisdictions a sense of like the best approaches, strategies, the most feasible ways to kind of continue to move on that trajectory towards net zero in the built environment. And then realizing that just having the codes is not necessarily going to ensure adoption, making sure that we're investing in resources to support the jurisdictions. And so an implementation guide being a hopefully long living resource for jurisdictions, whether you're part of this project or just within the region and interested in utilizing the code and the pathway. And then in terms of like the more intangibles, the process that we use, we want to be grounded both technically as well as ensuring that we're hearing from and acknowledging the needs and concerns of marginalized communities. That kind of along the theme of the implementation guide that we're investing in building capacity in building departments through training and certification, and then kind of a parallel of outreach to the broader community, to industry, to elected officials to really help build support for the adoption of these kinds of codes through building awareness and education and how we're messaging around it. So since the beginning of December, the technical team has taken the SOPO, which is like that scope of work. That's the real bottom line document that we're committing to with DOE. I'd mentioned on a previous call, there's 40 milestones, and we went through, assigned those milestones to someone on the technical team who's been working to flesh out the specific tasks and timeframes to get those accomplished. And to kind of help support this, we've collapsed it, since it's like 10 tasks and 40 milestones, into these 4, what we're calling critical project pathways, or what I'm calling. The first one really focuses around the outreach and education. And along with that is a career messaging piece to look at how we message building industry careers to certain communities. And then the second pathway is really kind of the formal input process through the equity advisory panel and the technical advisory group. The third pathway comes down to getting at those tangibles, starting with the survey work that Illum's going to be leading and the baseline assessment that comes out of that work. And then the final pathway is the training and certification that's part of the capacity building. So the MSs are the milestones. So just to kind of give you a sense of how the milestones kind of balance out across all of these, there are 6 milestones that aren't included in these pathways that are really just around putting together the project management plan, establishing the steering committee, working with PNNL around technical assistance, and also there's some national coordination components to it. So this is really kind of the bulk of what we're doing. So there are 2 actual project management plan documents that we're developing. I will provide copies in the steering committee folder for you guys to look at if you want to delve that deeply into it. One of them is an actual project management plan in MS Project, so if you have access to that. The other is a more simplified spreadsheet that collapses the milestones and major tasks by those pathways that I just mentioned, and then by quarter, rather than like a day-by-day look at it with the project plan. So we can make both of those available. It's been really helpful, especially even just the spreadsheet, so we can look at what needs to happen in each quarter, make sure that the timing of one piece works for the timing of other pieces, see how the work of individual organizations align. We'll make it available and encourage you guys to look at it. So with that little bit of context, I know we've had little bits of introduction here and there, but we thought it would be helpful, particularly now that we're really delving into the project management plan. And I think the technical team is really starting to understand kind of their pieces of it and their roles and responsibilities. We thought it would be really good to kind of turn it over and have the technical team introduce/reintroduce themselves. Not everyone's had a chance to do that, and just kind of talk just very briefly about, what they're bringing as an organization to this process. Because, we're really fortunate to have these folks that are doing the work on the behalf of us as Arizona and New Mexico communities. And so really just wanted you all to understand kind of what we're getting for that. So why don't we go in order, and I'll let Kevin, you and Sean kick off with your piece.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Kevin Barry here. I think Sean Denniston, who's an associate director here, had to jump to another call. I'm not sure if he's still here, but NBI is helping administer the project, and we'll be providing some technical assistance too. I think the most immediate thing in terms of technical assistance is setting up the tags. So we will be helping with that. Oh, and I should have mentioned with the award process, the reports and invoices from the subrecipients are due today. So you got an email from me earlier. Get those over to me. Thank you.
We have Stella. Want to talk a little bit about ICC's role?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Stella Carr with International Code Council, and we will be serving support and leading the development of the amendment and code process and offering technical assistance throughout that, as well as delivering training over the course of the project and resources for certifications as well. So that's our main role, and we are sort of involved throughout as well. So thanks, everyone.
David, do you want to talk about your team?
Sorry, I think I was muted. I'm David Longoria. I'm a program officer with Liz Phoenix. My executive director, Terry, is on this call, but our partners in this effort are not today. They're not able to be with us today. Anyway, Liz is going to be heading up the community engagement efforts for this project, and making sure that we are equitably involving and actively engaged with disadvantaged communities to make sure that we're informing the technical side of this project as much as possible. Thanks, Leslie.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Bean. I'm an associate professor at the University of Arizona and the co-director of the Institute for Energy Solutions. Our role, along with our program coordinator, Jennifer Garcia, and our postdoc, who is to be hired, we have three primary areas of interface with the project. The first is to work on the Living Implementation Guide. We're also going to be helping with the website. And then the postdoc will be sort of doing a meta study of this whole process to help understand how both the sort of hard outcomes and some of the soft things that develop over the course of the project, what Leslie has helpfully identified as the tangible and intangible aspects of the project all come together and contribute to its success. I'll hand it over to Illume.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Doherty, founder of Illume Advising. As a background, Illume is a research and strategy consultancy that supports the equitable transition of the energy industry. We operate nationally and are very excited to be working in one of our backyards. I'm in the office in Tucson, and my colleague Bahare is on as well. I'll let her introduce herself. Our primary role is to support in the baseline assessment, and we'll be engaging throughout the project, but we're going to be one of the first groups out of the gate looking to gather important information for you all in support of this initiative. So with that, Bahare, did you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Quick intro. Hi, everybody. My name is Bahare Van Boekel. I have been working the intersection of energy and building for the last 15-20 years, and I will be project manager and subject subject matter expert for the baseline assessment and survey that will be rolling out very quickly, actually in the next 2 months. At least the draft will be ready. And it's a pleasure working with all of you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Bolognani with SWEEP, or Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and we will be tackling the career messaging component. So we'll be putting together a couple of different versions of the messaging and then testing it, and then using that messaging subsequently, both during and after the project. And SWEEP will also be helping out with other technical aspects, both on the code side and the implementation guide as well. And also on our team is Karen Potter, who is not here today. She's our Arizona representative. She'll be my counterpart on this project. And then Jim Myers is our director of the buildings program, who will be supporting us at a higher level. And with that, I will pass it off to Quest Energy Group.
On the call might have had to step away. So, oh wait, or maybe he's not. I thought he was. Okay. So Anthony, you've worked with Quest since Greg wasn't able to make the call. Anything you want to share about your experiences with them? You were one of the organizations that recommended them as a resource for this project.
Sure. Yeah, Quest Energy Group provides energy modeling services as well as commissioning, and they've been involved in many projects in my jurisdiction in the city of Scottsdale related to the Green Building Code. And they have been doing that for a number of years and have served in an advisory capacity as well for the city.
And they also supported City of Tempe.
Yeah, that's correct.
John, I don't know if you were involved much in that project, but they supported some of what the foundational work and analysis that led to Tempe's adoption of the 2021 IECC.
I wasn't involved in that portion. I've been here about 10 months. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. I did see the involvement also with the IGCC, which we just recently adopted as well, and just starting to get some exposure here. So nice to meet everyone.
So Quest is going to be one of our really great technical resources, as well as Quadro Designs. So we'll move on to Shay.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you, sorry. Hi, my name is Sharia Jimenez. I go by Shay. I work here in Tucson, Arizona. I do design a lot of residential projects, design work for smaller residential projects, additions and remodels and casitas and smaller infill development projects. So I'm really excited to be on the team with you all and look at things more from the homeowner perspective and small builder perspective, and also just the on the other side of someone who has to comply with codes and is reading them from the other end. So thank you all.
Hi all, I'm Brianne Fisher with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, or USDN. My colleague Latasha Bell and I, and a couple other colleagues probably, are excited to be part of this project. USDN, just as way of background, is a nonprofit network of staff from almost 300 local governments, mostly cities, counties, and other types of local governments across the US and Canada. Leslie is one of our amazing members, and I see a couple other familiar names on here. And then I know a few other member communities are a part of the project as well, which is really exciting. We're excited to lend a hand with several aspects of the project, helping to develop some curriculum, helping with elements relating to centering equity in processes and deliverables, and then disseminating all of the exciting deliverables and information coming out of this project to the wider USDN network. So thanks for having us.
Nicole with the Nature Conservancy wasn't able to make it. The Nature Conservancy's actually got a little different role in that they're not a subrecipient, but are bringing their own money to this project. So Nicole runs the Urban Climate Program at TNC's Phoenix office, and they're really focused on, how do they shift the dialogue in this area around support for decarbonization, for advanced building codes. And so she'll be helping actually fund some portion of the engagement, really focused, I think, a little bit more on industry, on utilities, on kind of the political side of things, hopefully then leading up to kind of better political support and messaging and that piece as well. So we're really appreciative of having them as a partner. And then this is not the entire technical team. There is another subcontracting component that we're starting to work through right now, but LISC is running a process to identify 2 to 4 additional community-based organizations to really help us, bring in the voices in communities that aren't often represented. And David, not to put you too much on the spot, because I know you guys are early in the process, but do you want to speak to that at all real quick?
What I can share at this point is that, as you alluded to, we are beginning to have conversations with different community-based organizations regionally that we think would be a really good fit for forwarding a lot of this community engagement work. I think that in probably another month from now, we'll have a better idea of, bringing exactly who we think those organizations ought to be, and with more detail and specificity in terms of the direction that we want to go with it. But we're very excited at the early discussions that we've had, not only among our internal group forwarding this work, but with some of these potential partners. So all good signs, and we're very excited for future collaborations in this effort.
So want to pause there and give our jurisdictions a chance to, do you have any questions, anything you want to know more kind of about the project management planning process we're undertaking right now, or about any of our technical partners?
This is Anthony. I have a question related to ICC. I know that Stella mentioned the code development process, or at least code change submittals. Is that something that you'll be recommending or will be putting forward?
Stella, you want me to take the first stab at that?
Yeah.
So, Anthony, so those of you on this call that are building department folks should have a couple of meetings invites that you got for next week. So Anthony, the technical process of what code development's going to look like and the amendment process is still not fully defined. ICC will have a large role in that. NBI will have a role in that. We're really fortunate to have ICC's Director of Energy, who will be kind of one of their lead folks. And so those calls are with you all to kind of talk through what you'd like to see that process look like in more detail, how formal, you know, what is the what kind of amendment process do you want to see happen? What kind of public comment process? How does that all come together to get us to an actual draft code? And so those two conversations will really help inform in more detail that particular piece of the project management plan. That's the one area where we're still putting some work into defining it a little better. Does that answer your question?
Yes, great. Thank you.
Yeah, we want to make sure, oh, go ahead.
If I'm able to expand on that, I know the proper setting, as you said, will be next week and sort of that meeting itself, but it sounds like that is a shared vision here with ICC as well. Is there any general overview of what that will look like from a technical carve out? Is if I hope you understand what I'm saying. Is there any view of what that may look like for ICC in a rollout? I assume they can speak to some vision that they have with this getting rolled out in the future.
Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that this process is more so specifically for jurisdictions in Arizona. So then the process would be sort of up to your jurisdictions on adopting these amendments that are developed through the process. I don't know yet how this will integrate into potential code change proposals or anything like that for the larger IECC. Again, I'm not a building official or a code professional, so that is just sort of my understanding as we've talked about it. But Chris Stanger, who leads our IECC development, will be our technical advisor for this project from ICC's perspective on those elements. So he would be able next week to sort of address some of those questions or concerns and maybe how this project may or may not integrate with other sort of things going on in the code development world, if that's what you're asking about. But again, I might have misunderstood your question, so apologies.
That is spot on. That answered it. I will wait to hear more next week as well.
Yeah, so I think, John, there's a couple potential questions that folks may have, and one is like, well, what is the scope of what's being covered in the resilience code? That's part of what's going to be informed by the survey work. So I think we're all presuming, the IECC, the IGCC, there's probably some elements of some of the other codes that we'll want to incorporate. And that's part of what we're also hoping to get assistance from PNNL on, is really identifying that intersection of what is in the code with things related to climate resilience and equity. And so helping us understand where we focus our efforts. And then the goal with the overall code is to have it published by ICC as a regional offering, as an option. We are not, as part of this project, asking the partner jurisdictions to implement it in any specific way. So how you incorporate that code, whether you do, when you do, how you do it, is really up to your jurisdiction when you decide you go through a code amendment process. So we're really more about just developing something for us, by us, that we can use as a resource as appropriate. The idea behind having it as a shared resource was to help reduce the burden of moving in this direction by being as consistent as possible across all of us. So that's kind of part of the driver behind it. But you know, this is really a collective vision. So Anthony or you know, any others who want to share your thoughts on kind of where we want to go with this real quick.
Well, I suppose I'll wait for the meeting next week and hear from everyone else.
I'm right there with them, but I do thank you for that overview and where this is going to get connected to ICC as well. Looking forward to that.
And I see Harold, you have a question.
No, I have a comment. We just got our 2021 code adopted yesterday. And it's just to explain to you the process. You know, we take, for example, there's people that draft a wishful code, and then that's presented to a committee, and then the committee is made up of probably a good number of contractors and then other interested parties, environmentalists, and so then, you know, amendments are submitted. We added EV charger requirements to our code, and there was very strong public support for that. During the review process by the committee, people were aware of the provisions in the 2024, and they were specifically interested in the 2024 provisions that relax a code, right? For example, the R60, you know, in the 24 code goes down to R49. So contractors like that. So we ended up with a interesting blended code, which of course technically doesn't mean exactly what the 21 code is about. But in the end, that's what the compromise was. And our code is adopted statewide. So we have a lot of rural interests that, you know, come into play, and the ability of rural contractors to meet the requirements is harder than the cities like Las Cruces, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Taos. So in the end, when we got to the final approval, we had a lot of objection from the contractors saying that the costs were going to increase. And fortunately, we had information from PNNL, a report, right, that analyzed the costs and benefits of the contract, so that information was useful. During the whole adoption process, we had a lot of op-eds from contractors, you know, writing their opinions in the newspaper. So that's something I need to warn you about, that it really would be good for you to counter those op-eds. We had good results in countering the op-eds. You know, building is very different because of the interest rates. You know, I think in the last 20 years, we got very comfortable adding a lot of gingerbread to our homes. You know, so it was easy to do anything, right? It didn't impact the payment. But we can't do that anymore, right? So any gingerbread that's added, you know, is difficult to deal with for a buyer. We were hit a lot with the fact that, you know, the costs gone up and the interest rates are high, and so that's a double whammy for buyers, right? So every time we add a requirement to the code, they say you knock out a whole bunch of people, right? So it was actually tough to get it through that final committee because all the contractors objecting because of cost. And you know, the energy code is different. It's not a safety code, you know, or a like the other codes are, right? So they use that also as a point to oppose the code adoption. But I think it finally made it through something like, I think 6-2 in the committee. And this is a committee that's appointed by the governor. And as you're aware, our governor is one of the most supportive people of environmental and reducing our emissions and all that. But it still had a tough time. But it's just a thought to be aware of, right? The contractors, may be active, in doing op-eds in newspapers. It probably would be good to be ready to respond to that. You're going to get different input, right? Of course, that people, the contractors especially, they're interested in relaxing things, right? So that is a problem. But we did start out with a wishful code, and I think we got most of it through, so maybe we're 5%, maybe under, when DOE finally looks at it, so we got most of what we wanted. I think everybody was happy or a little bit unhappy, as you go through this whole process. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you, and if you need any additional information, I'd be glad to help you with it. We expect it to be effective the end of July in the state, and it does cover every square inch of the state. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Harold. I did see courtesy of sweep. I did see the announcement that you guys had voted on that yesterday. And yeah, I think we'd all be really interested in kind of learning more about the amendments that you put into that process and kind of help inform what we're looking to do with this resilience code. And I think that's where, Nature Conservancy's focus on kind of like the political, the industry outreach is going to be really key, because that seems to be where Nicole really wants to go, is kind of preempting some of that pushback by, by engaging stakeholders early on and really, really meaningfully in this process. And Anthony.
When I get the final version after the committee hearing, I'll go ahead and share it with you guys. Okay, the final code version.
Thanks, Harold.
Yeah, this is Anthony. I just want to thank you for that information, Harold. Which are you with the State of New Mexico Energy Office?
Yeah, I'm with the Energy Office, and we support our Construction Industries Division, sister agency, in implementing the code. Okay, so we try to get grants, training grants for them. We currently have a really intensive grant with all the community colleges, currently training people on the new requirements of the 2021 code. So that's part of our ongoing effort to prepare the industry to implement the code.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go really quick through the next couple of slides because I want to make sure that Anne and her team have sufficient time to talk about the survey work, but just to kind of break into a little bit more specificity around what to expect for this next phase, for this first phase of the project. We're kind of looking at in terms of like, what are the initial building blocks that have to be in place? So by the end of this quarter, which ends in March, we have to have a project website up. The plan is that since we have this implementation guide that we want to be long-lived, let's create a project website that leads toward that. So it'll be the same site throughout the whole project. We've just started, thank you, Laura, for asking about a logo, because that kickstarted a conversation around branding. And I know, David, your team has expressed some concerns about the rather clunky Resilient Southwest Building Code collaborative name. So we're going to be taking a little time to go, okay, what do we really want to call this? What kind of branding, what kind of logo? As part of that website discussion, we need to establish the advisory committees, so figure out the function, structure, and the process for getting people onto those committees by the end of March. The plan is to have those start meeting in April. Then before the end of June, we'll have a community engagement plan that we will submit to DOE. You guys will see that before it's finalized, as well as figuring out who those additional 2 to 4 community-based organizations are and getting them on contract. So those are kind of like where a lot of our attention's focused right now, is getting to those early deliverables. The final kind of quote unquote tangibles for this phase are not due till the end of next March. And that is that assessment report that Anne's going to talk about, that is really kind of scoping out the resilience codes and programs, kind of what I mentioned earlier to John, that, you know, figuring out exactly what we're tackling as part of that resilience code. We didn't put a milestone in at this phase around the net zero roadmap, but we really need to kind of get that scoped as well. And then a framework for the implementation guide. And what's going to lead us to those final tangibles is really the survey work, where we're aiming to, at a minimum, focus on jurisdictions with building code authority. But we probably want to go broader than that. So we've got some planning discussions coming up to really figure out, you know, what are our target audiences, where do we want to focus, and that's part of what Anne wants to do today. We'll have at least 5 meetings of the Equity Advisory Panel and Technical Advisory Group to lead into providing input to these tangibles. There will be a community outreach piece of this that LISC will be leading. And then kind of in parallel is initial wave of training on the 2021 IECC that ICC is going to lead. So just a real quick other way to look at it is in terms of kind of those tangibles and intangibles. Here are kind of our lead organizations. So LISC, as you know, David mentioned earlier, they're really taking on that community equity piece. So the community engagement plan, figuring out the equity advisory panel and running that, as well as the kind of the outreach and education that's focused on the broader community, as well as our kind of what I might call our equity communities. Nature Conservancy kind of leaning more into the industry, political side of that, NBI and ICC on the technical pieces, and kind of helping frame up those elements. Then IES, Institute for Energy Solutions, as Jonathan said, will be taking the lead on the website, leading into figuring out the implementation guide. And then Illume, who I'm about to hand this over to, will be leading the surveys and assessment report. So before I hand it over to Anne to run through her stuff, any questions from folks real quick? Otherwise, and Anne, feel free to just tell me when you want me to advance, or Bahara, whoever's presenting.
Well, we're going to be tag teaming a little bit, so I will do that. And I will say to all the folks on this call, we have a meeting scheduled on the 31st where we're going to dig into the objectives and focus of this effort in much more depth. So while we're going to move through these slides quickly, there are more opportunities to have this conversation. So don't fret if you have a number of things that you want to cover that we can't get to in the time that we have. So with that, Leslie, why don't you go ahead and just jump directly to slide 12 for me? Quickly in the next, 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to go over at a high level how we are conceptualizing this baseline assessment. This is a very, very initial take. And the point of sharing this now is to tease the conversation for better alignment in our meeting on the 31st, and then to inquire about priority topics that are of interest to this group that will help focus that conversation and discussion we'll have on the 31st. So we can jump to the next slide. You can bypass this. That's a little information you can also bypass this. All right, so let's talk about the assessment goals. currently, the way that we have this conceptualized, and this is coming out of the plan, is to identify challenges with the enforcement and implementation of energy codes, identify shortages that exist in the available workforce that's obviously at a higher level, and assess resource needs that are going to be, that are necessary for this group that will go into sort of the surveys and our interviews. Our target population is very much focused on building stakeholder groups, and as Leslie mentioned, on those building departments that have code authority, and that may or may not include a number of different individuals who can report on behalf of their organizations or their departments. And then to a secondary extent, building associations who may be able to speak on behalf of builders or contractors, but not actually reaching out to builders or contractors specifically within the scope of this. And again, as Leslie called out, our goal is to reach at least 25% of jurisdictions across Arizona and New Mexico that have adopted and will implement or are implementing building codes. So with that, we can jump to the next slide. Now, as I mentioned in a previous meeting, it's worth saying that all data collection efforts importantly need to be quite focused and clear on what we're trying to achieve in those efforts. And so we've provided a quick summary of our data collection tasks and sort of the parameters that we're setting in these tasks to help us focus and align on what will be included in the survey, in the assessment survey, and also the in-depth interviews. From a sampling standpoint, this is going to be one of the most important and first tasks that we're going to engage in with you all, and hopefully with your support, as well as through secondary research, to develop a stratified sampling approach by region so that we are equitably and truly representing the two regions of both Arizona and New Mexico, and how we collect information, that is, who we survey and the ways in which we gather that data, will be determined based on the way that code is implemented in each state. And so you may see some variation in terms of the number of folks that we communicate with in, say, Arizona versus New Mexico. That will largely be driven by the decision-making and for lack of a better term, sort of authority structures of each region. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this list of proposed targets or folks that we're hoping to talk to in that sampling effort. So for those of you who are engaging in the oversight of this effort, we're really going to be asking you to sanity check our sample and make sure that you feel that it's representative of the folks we're trying to connect with. Then we're also going to move into survey design and implementation. For the sake of maintaining a higher response rate and higher quality responses, our goal is to keep this survey relatively succinct, aiming for about 10 to 12 minutes. It seems like a short period of time, but when you are on the other end of a survey and it's taking longer than about 8 minutes or so, people start to lose patience and want to move along, especially professionals. So this is the sort of timestamp that we're going to target. And we aim to do this primarily online. We may choose to do some targeted follow-ups as part of our in-depth interviews. And our sample size, specifically the number of folks we intend to talk to, will be driven by our sample itself. So once we arrive at our sample parameters and the sort of universe of folks that we will connect with through these online surveys, we will then establish goals for ourselves in terms of the actual sample size. And then following up on those interviews and drawing on the results of those interviews, we'll move into in-depth interviews from the surveys themselves, excuse me. So our in-depth interviews aim to be about 30 minutes long. They're usually web-enabled through Zoom or another format like Teams. And we have a small number of these, about 12. So what we're going to do is be highly focused in our outreach and really aim to get clear and specific on what we want to gather so that we can identify the best individuals to provide information or the greatest insight to this group through those in-depth interviews. You can go to the next slide. So Leslie, you can advance. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Bahare.
Sure. Thank you, Anne. So based on what Anne explained, that we need to be actually really clear on what we want to ask and how we are going to ask and be succinct. We identify research topics for this survey or assessment. These are based on your project plan that you identify specifically information that you want to collect as part of the survey. Also, we got a list of initial questions that we think about from Christopher from IECC. So those two kind of guide this table that you see here. So the research topic, you can see what is the status of current code that we think kind of really looking at what's happening in New Mexico and apologies for the typo here in Arizona jurisdiction. That could be a secondary research looking at what was adopted and kind of documenting that. But you look at the core activities that we identify as our surveys and interviews, the topics that we need to include in survey and interviews. And then based on these research topics, then there will be we call it primary research questions or key research question to, again, guide us exactly, identify what kind of data we need to collect and what kind of question we need to put into our survey and interview to collect those desired data. So you would see that as of now, we have the challenges and barriers for code advancement and implementation that include both compliance and enforcement as one of the key topics for our survey and interviews, workforce needs, and also additional needs for implementation and resource needs for jurisdiction or any of the building stakeholder, developer and builder, and code official is part of our core topic for the research. Equitable code development is not necessarily spelled out in assessment task, but we heard it and we noticed references of that on your plan, so we put that there. And the last part, the attitude toward advancing energy, water, and resilience code, that we heard about it a little bit talking from New Mexico's energy office. Again, that's a question that Chris put out there as an area that could be included in our survey and interviews. And did I cover everything? Did I miss anything on this slide?
No, I think you've covered it well. And I think it's important to name that this is a starting place for us. And as we go into our planning meetings, our goal will be to refine these research questions, as Bahareh called out, and then we begin to operationalize them into actual survey questions that go into an instrument for data collection. So we can go to the next slide. So with that, we wanted to take a quick pulse from you all to understand which of these areas at present feel the most important to you as part of this baseline assessment. Leslie, I believe you were going to institute a poly through this, and if not, we can always do it informally.
Yes, so it should be, look in the chat if you can. There should be.
Oh yeah, I see it. So we'll ask you to click that button, start the poly, provide your responses, and then these responses will be shared, but we'll also use them to guide our conversation and really dig in on the 31st. And as you all are filling this out, this really was the primary goal of our portion of this meeting. We wanted to orient you, provide these initial research questions and areas, allow you to provide us with some quick feedback, and then to plug this meeting coming up on the 31st. All right.
So please take a couple minutes. If for some reason you can't see the poly in the chat, for question A, just pick the two items, just 1 through 6, and just put the associated numbers in the chat.
Oh, it looks like some folks are having IT challenges with the poll. For the sake of time, it might be better just to drop in your preferences in the chat so that we can capture them all in the same place, Jonathan. And if anyone else is having trouble, please do that. While we're gathering these results, I don't think we have time to cover them, to really talk through them at this point, given everyone's time, precious time, and that we're coming up on the top of the hour. In the slides that Leslie will circulate, you'll also see a general timeline for this effort that you can sort of take a quick look at, and then of course send us questions as you have them. And Leslie, we'll get a transcript of the chat, correct, that we can go through? Perfect.
Yep. I'll make sure that's available. And I'll also recirculate the polling questions just in the follow-up email. So if you had trouble, you can you can respond via email, and I'll aggregate that for you. And
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So with that, I'll leave it at that so that you can do any closing business. And of course, feel free to reach out to us directly if you have questions.
okay, that sounds good. So just really quick in our last couple minutes, this is kind of reminders and requests. I know some folks are still having trouble getting into the shared drive. What Kevin has found is if you start with the main link and then navigate from there, that tends to work a little better. So I'll send the PowerPoint out with this. So try it this way, and then under that folder, there's a milestones tab, task 1 PMP and steering committee, milestone 1.2 steering committee. Sorry, we used the structure that follows the SOFO because it just makes our reporting and document management easier. But in there, you'll see the meetings for each year. There'll be the quarterly reporting resources. There's the roster for the committee. And then under each of the meeting folders, you will find the PowerPoint, the recording, the transcript from the call, all of that. As Kevin said, the reporting is due today. To make it simple for everyone, if you are a city or county, if you're a jurisdiction and you committed to hours of in-kind match for this project, this is kind of what the reporting form looks like. There's 3 components to it. There's a template that's available. Just download a copy for your own use. I did a sample one for us. It's completely fake and just mocked up, but hopefully it will help. And then there's a more detailed guidance document. Send those to me. So if you're a city or a county and you're doing your in-kind match requirements, send them to me. I'm going to aggregate them and provide them to Kevin. If you're a subrecipient, you are to submit your reporting to Kevin directly. And I didn't do a guidance document because that's really, it needs to fit his requirements, because this is, more constrained by DOE rules than just the in-kind stuff. So the links are here. And then right at the hour, I'm glad Harold mentioned that I did have a congrats in here over adopting the 2021 IEC. We have a bunch of upcoming meetings. I'm going to put out a request in the email around how you want to be notified about emails. So please, with the follow-up email, take a look at it, because we've got a couple code development planning meetings next week. The following week, we need to delve a little bit more into the technical assistance request. We have a project website planning, baseline and survey planning. And then I also put in here some tentative topics that we think we want to focus on for the next several meetings. So apologies, it is 1 after. I think we had a lot of good discussion on this call. I appreciate everyone's time, and look for an email from me with the PowerPoint, a few follow-up questions, and letting you know that the reporting and everything's on the website. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Leslie.
I'll follow up with you. I'll work on compiling everything tomorrow.
Great.
I guess I should stop recording first.